scary stories.
So I just recently found this thread and decided to share something that happened to me a few months ago that creeped me out. Tickets for my favorite group, BTS, were going on sale. Getting tickets for them is hell, and having a good laptop and Wi-Fi was key to up your chances of snatching a good seat. My university's Wi-Fi was complete ass, so I decided that I would go around to various fast food places and test their Wi-Fi to see which ones was the best. This wasn't too hard to do since my university was walking distance from an abundance of various restaurants and fast food places, plus more food places that were a few minutes away by car or bus. One of these places I decided to test was McDonald's, which was only a 5-minute drive from my university. I had my boyfriend take me, and we went inside and set up my laptop, iPad, and iPhone. We ordered something to snack on as well, because you can't pass up the opportunity of McDonald's fries if you are in McDonald's. In front of our table was a group of old geriatric corpses. My boyfriend and I were busy checking the Wi-Fi speed and conversing and giggling when one of the old guys decided to jokingly make a comment along the lines about how we shouldn't be doing homework on a weekend and how teenagers are always working or into their phones. We both just awkwardly chuckled and then went back to what we were doing and tried to look busy. Apparently old people don't care if you're busy whatsoever, because he kept making jokes and speaking to us and telling us to stop working, etc. Notably, the majority of his remarks and conversation were directed towards me and not just my boyfriend. Now, I was already kind of nervous because people randomly talking to me makes me a little antsy, especially ones who keep on rambling after I make it clear I don't want to talk anymore. But him being an older man added to my nervousness even more due to how creepy and predatory they can be. He starts asking questions that are more personal, like where do I go to school and how old I was and whatnot. I was getting uncomfortable at this point, but answered his questions and told him the college I attended and how old I was. Looking back now, I don't think me telling him the truth about it was that harmful. He probably forgot as soon as I told him. He also starts complimenting me and saying how pretty I was. All the while he's doing this, the other men were either laughing or telling him to leave the poor girl alone. He starts to make some comments on me and my boyfriend's relationship as well, saying how we were cute and it's nice to see young couples and how long we've been with each other. After we answer, he laughs and says,
Well, if you ever get tired of him and want to look for someone else, I'm always available. You can kill me and get some money.
I was 100% uncomfortable at this point and just laughed along nervously while scooching closer to my boyfriend. I didn't think he was serious though, and was just trying to joke around with us to seem likable or cool, but him even suggesting that was creepy and uncalled for. He finally left us alone after that, as he chuckles to himself and goes back to talking to the other corpses. After a few minutes, I asked my boyfriend if he would grab me some things from the car because I wasn't feeling too good due to reasons. As soon as he left, the old guys and his friends get up too, and I hoped that they would just walk out and pass by my table without saying a word to me. But apparently I have bad luck, so instead the same old man talking to me stops and stands right by me. He sees my university ID card and picks it up, making remarks on how good I looked in the picture and how I looked even prettier in person, and just looking me up and down. His friends chuckle and tell him to leave the poor girl alone, and I hoped he would clean the wax out of his ears and listen and leave me alone. He just laughs, places his hand on my shoulder, giving it a light squeeze, while exclaiming,
No, I don't want to leave her alone. Key.
At this point, I was way past uncomfortable. I knew nothing deadly was going to happen to me because we were in a public place, even though the McDonald's was empty, so I knew they weren't going to kidnap me or anything, but I was still severely creeped out. I was screaming in my head for my boyfriend to hurry the fuck back in here so that they would leave, because I didn't know what to do besides nervously laugh. They linger for a while the old guy looks at my ID card one more time before putting it back down on the table and squeezes my shoulder again. He finally leaves after telling me to have a good day. A few seconds later, my boyfriend returns, and I'm sitting there trying to relax and calm my nerves. I might be overreacting at getting so nervous because the threat of me being taken or hurt was most likely next to none, but old men hitting on young girls just severely creeps me out beyond words. To that old man, let's never meet again. So this happened over the span of a year when I was 15 or 16 years old. I'm 20 now, and it only recently been revealed to me how fucked up the situation really was. I was still living at home at the time, but my sister, who is 7 years older than me, had moved out and was living with her new husband, their high school best friend, and some other dude they met via one of those find a roommate sites. He was kind of the reclusive nerdy type, but preferring to hide in his room watching Star Trek, playing computer games than actually hanging out with the roommates, and the only person he ever really seemed to want to be around was his similarly shy, nerdy girlfriend. For a little context of the story, at the time this happened, he was 28 and she was 24. They were both a little weird, but initially seemed entirely harmless. For ease of telling the story and for saving on characters, the friendly roommate will be FR. Weird roommate will be WR, and his weird girlfriend will be WGF. Now, my sister and I never really had the best relationship with our parents, and at this point things were especially rocky. Our mother was dating a guy who was, to put it kindly, an abusive sack of shit who seemingly loathed me and would find any excuse to get off at me. As a result, I spent a lot of time staying over at my sister's place. It was around the time I'd spend a lot of time there that WR and WGF started to get really strange. As I said earlier, the pair of them were always kinda odd. They only ever seemed to want to speak to each other and would even go as far as to ignore anyone else who spoke to them. WGF was worse than WR for this by a mile. He would at least give you monosyllabic responses most of the time. She had a kind of creepy habit of just blankly staring at you for a couple of seconds, then walking away if you asked her a question or tried to engage her in conversation at all. That isn't really the weird behavior, though. When I would stay over, I'd sleep on a futon in FR's office space, which was on the ground floor. It happened to be next to the downstairs bathroom, which for some reason WGF vastly preferred to the upstairs one. She would take long showers in the middle of the night, which is whatever. I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, and she wasn't a shower singer or anything like that, so I generally slept right through them. One night, however, I stayed up mega late doing revision and homework and happened to be awake after she finished her shower. I was too absorbed in my tasks to really pay attention to anything else, but I definitely noted hearing the shower shut off because that was my indicator to how goddamn late it really was. Approximately 10 minutes later, I look up from my laptop, and there she is. I always kept the door open just a crack because that room tended to get unbearably hot if I didn't. And she was standing there outside the room, butt-ass naked, watching me through the open crack in the door. I said her name and asked if she was okay, which seemingly startled her because she walked away pretty sharpish. I convinced myself that in my over-caffeinated, sleep-deprived state, I'd imagined the whole thing and didn't mention it to anyone. Fast forward around a month, and I head over to my sister's one night to find FR kind of agitated about what he perceives to be a peeping Tom problem. He found fingerprints on the outside of his office window in such a way that would imply someone had been pressing up against the glass and looking in. The blind in his room was slightly too small for the window, so you could see in from the outside if you looked through the sides, and the room was on the front of the house and the window was easily accessible from the street. He had become concerned that some random passing pervert had been spying on him while he was having a private moment, so to speak, in his office, or else some potential burglar had been sizing up the joint. The police were called, but as they didn't have any external CCTV at this point, no evidence could be provided, and ultimately not a lot could be done. To combat this escalating further, FR installed both internal and external CCTV on the house. This was installed whilst WR and WGF were away on a holiday, and I guess everyone just forgot to tell them about it. Another couple of months later, I go to my sister's to find WR's room empty and informed that he has moved out. Of course, I asked why, and I was informed simply that he and WGF were a pair of fucking creeps, and that the others had collectively decided to kick them out. Apparently, her watching me through the office door was not a one-time incident. The CCTV footage showed that she regularly made a habit of standing and watching me through the cracked door, sometimes for as long as 20 to 30 minutes. I was just usually asleep when she did it. Not only that, but the fingerprints on the window had quite apparently been from WR, standing outside and watching me after I'd showered, and was just hanging out in just a towel, which was a less regular occurrence, but apparently was caught on camera enough times for it to be concerning. As if that wasn't weird enough in and of itself, I was recently hanging out with my sister and her husband, and he passed a comment about how he wishes they'd told me the full story at the time, so he could have chosen to press charges. I asked what he meant by that, and he revealed that not only had they both been secretly watching me, the CCTV also showed that they had messed with the food and stuff that I bought, including clips of him licking all of my apples, her spitting in my orange juice, even dumping regular cow's milk into my lactose-free stuff, which explained why I had a period of feeling really sick from nowhere. To top it all off, apparently when FR barged into their room to confront them about it, he not only found that several shirts I thought I'd misplaced elsewhere had been stolen by the two of them, and literally hung on their wall. She had done several drawings of me sleeping, and written a poem called Ode to My Name, whose contents I don't know and don't really want to know. Apparently FR gave them an ultimatum of, you have 2 hours to get the fuck out of this house, and never contact Gingerbread Bloke or any of us again, or I'm calling the police. And they took the former option. They have never tried to contact me subsequent to this, but I feel sick thinking of what they were potentially planning. My sister's 20-something roommate who watched my teenage self sleep, let's not meet again. Just a little note before we get started, my son looks nothing like me and I have a baby face, so when people see my son and I, they see babysitter, not mother. I had just gotten off of work and my husband was waiting for me with our son, who was 4 months old at the time. We ordered something to go and my husband went to use the bathroom while my co-workers co-ed over my baby at the pickup counter. I see this older man watching us, but I dismiss it because my son usually gets a lot of attention, plus he came to the McDonald's pretty regularly and didn't raise any red flags. He came up to us and smiled at my son and asked if he could hold him. I politely declined. He pulled a 20 out of his wallet.
Why don't you take this and get yourself a sandwich and leave the baby with me?
He said, trying to hand me the money. No, thank you. I tried to be polite. I needed my job. We just got a new general manager, and I wanted to make a good impression.
Aren't you hungry? It's so hard to work 2 jobs. I'm sure if anything happened, the parents wouldn't blame you.
I was about to go off on him when my husband came out of the bathroom and placed himself between me and the man.
Oh, you must be the father.
He offered my husband the money, but didn't talk about taking our son. We made our way out of the store, and then the man followed, offering us money the entire way. My husband, fed up, stopped on a dime. The man ran into him, and my husband stared daggers at the man until he went back into the store. A few weeks later, he came back to the store. He ranted on about how he could have given the baby a better life than the young man. I told him I was the mother and that he could get his sausage biscuit somewhere else because he wasn't welcome here anymore. I used to work at a large department store known for not paying its employees basic minimum wage. I worked in the clothing section with varying hours. Since I was going to school at the time, one evening I had an older gentleman wander through and strike up a conversation. It wasn't unusual to have chatty customers, so I wasn't worried and talked with him as I was working. I wandered around the department and he stayed still, telling me all sorts of things, how people mistake him for Latino, but he's Portuguese, how he hates the term Latino because no one actually speaks Latin, how he actually works up north for a couple of hours as some kind of doctor, but comes down fairly often for presentations and meetings. He wasn't out of the ordinary, but definitely seemed more like a lonely man who wanted company more than anything. Fast forward maybe 6 months, and he's come in a handful of times since the initial visit, but never overstepped many boundaries until I found out he was asking about me. Not terrible in and of itself if he's looking for a friend to say hi to, except he came in and asked every single employee he could find for me. Luckily one time I was stuck in the back the whole day, so never ventured onto the sales floor, and the other 2 days I wasn't working. I had multiple people tell me some old dude was looking for you. I also learned he spent several hours in the store just wandering. Fast forward a month or two more, and I got stuck checking customers out at a register. They do it on purpose. Cashiers get paid more, so they take sales associates like me and train us on the cash register, so they pull us off the sales floor whenever it gets crowded at the registers. Instead of paying for another cashier shift, he happens to come in that day, sees me at the register, and waits in line. If anyone has been to any grocery store ever, you'll know that the line gets long. Every single customer in front of him had full shopping carts of items, but he patiently waited. At this point, I was weirded out because he kept asking about me and repeatedly coming in to the store, so I was weary and kept an eye on him. When it's finally his turn, he walks up, thrusts a picked package in my hand, smiles, and walks off. I was so surprised I didn't react quickly enough to reject the gift. Inside was a romantic card, printed translations for all kinds of common phrases including "I love you," from English to Portuguese, with a note that said, "I can't wait to practice with you," and a $100 gift card for Victoria's Secret. I went to the manager and told her what happened. She took down a description of him and notified security, and told me it was up to me if I wanted to keep the gifts. Co-workers eventually convinced me to keep the gift card, but I chucked everything else. However, I did not use the gift card for more than 3 years because I looked up the fine print and saw that if he knew the card number, he could call and see if it was used. I didn't like the idea of that. When I quit not long after, co-workers kept me updated whenever he wandered into the store looking for me. He did not stop for at least 6 months after I left. I've had many other encounters at work and can share if there's interest. Some are definitely as bad, if not worse, than this. Last year I went out of state for my first year of college to school in India. The first week I formed many friendships, and one of those was with a boy who would end up becoming my stalker. He was fairly normal at the start, and I genuinely enjoyed his company as well as his roommates, and we became quite close. Spending a lot of time together, soon I had developed friendships with other people, and he became a part of my friend group. About a month into knowing him, I started to get a feeling that he liked me more than a friend. I still acted normal around him because I did not want to draw attention to it because the feeling wasn't mutual, and I did not want to ruin our friendship. One night, about 3 months into school, everything changed. This night, all of my friends came to my dorm room to drink before they went to a party. I had told my friends that they could drink in my room, but I did not want to go out because I was very upset by a hurricane that was hitting my town in Florida. All of my friends were supportive of this, except my soon-to-be stalker. Throughout the time he was in my room, he was making jokes about how dramatic I was being, and even when everyone else told him to stop, he wouldn't let up. Finally, everyone is ready to leave to go to the party. My stalker is the last to exit my room before going. He tells me that he cares about me and that if I change my mind and decide to go out, or if I need anything, that I should text him, which I found strange given his previous behavior, but I figured he had come to his senses and was attempting to be a good friend. A couple of hours after my friends leave, I get a text from another friend telling me to come help our one friend out who is too drunk and is vomiting. So I change and walk to her building. Upon arriving, I find out she is fine now and that they put her into her bed. I go outside of their building and cry about what's happening at my home on the steps by myself. I get a text from my stalker asking if I had changed my mind. In that moment, I was sad, and I figured if I went out with them and drank, maybe I would feel better. I tell him where I am and ask if the group wants to meet up. He says that they will come, but arrives alone. He suggests we hang out in my room, but I told him I want to go to see the group. He didn't seem to be too happy with this, but I call one of my other friends to see where they are, and we go to another dorm building where they are drinking. When we get inside, we have a hard time figuring out which room they are on and what floor they are in. My stalker is visibly drunk at this point and pushes me into one of the connecting suites that is vacant. He begins to make fun of me again for being upset and is very touchy. I push him off of me and tell him to stop. We finally find one of our friends, and that friend tells us that we can meet him in his room and he has alcohol there. My stranger suggests that we go to his room instead because he's in a fight with one of the other guys and does not want to see him. I believe this and I agree. When we get to his room, we are greeted by his roommate and a bunch of his roommate's friends. My stalker grabs my backpack with his alcohol and says we should go to my room and our friend group can meet up with us, so we do. My dorm had 2 beds in it, and my stalker sits down on one of them. I sleep on, so I decide to sit on the other one. He puts on a movie,
and everything is normal at first, I immediately begin texting my one friend whose room everyone was in and tell him to bring our friends over to my room. My friends were all drunk at this point, and everyone I texted wasn't making sense. My stalker then gets into the same bed as me and lays beside me. I immediately feel uncomfortable and start rapidly texting my friends and tell them he is acting strange and that they need to come now. He sees I'm on the phone a lot, so my stalker grabs my phone from me and tells me I need to take a 10-minute break from the phone. During this point, he becomes very touchy and suggests we try this trick with my jewel where he exhales into my mouth, to which I reject. I tell him it has been 10 minutes and that he needs to give me my phone back, but he denies knowing what I am talking about. I stand up and move to the other bed because I feel uncomfortable. He gets up and moves as well. I sit at the very end of the bed opposite of him and demand my phone. He continues to play dumb. Instead, he moves closer to me and tries to playfully touch me. I've had enough at this point and tell him that he needs to give me my phone right now, and that it isn't funny anymore. He tells me he needs to go to the bathroom. While he's in the bathroom, I grab my laptop and I iMessage one of my friends to come to my room ASAP and to tell them that he is being very creepy and I need their help. Once he returns, he tells me right away that he wants to level with me and that he thinks that we should hook up. I had been making it very clear the entire time that I did not want that, and I thought that he would be able to read my body language in this situation and realize I was very clearly uncomfortable. I tell him no and that I just want to be friends and not ruin the friendship. He doesn't listen. He comes over to me and starts playfully grabbing me, and when I push him off and tell him to stop, he pushes me down onto the bed and tries to come over me. He grabs my legs and pulls me into him. I was thankfully sober and was able to kick him away from me, and I get up and run into the hallway. He doesn't leave my room and begins to insult me and tell me he never wanted to be my friend and only wanted to sleep with me, and that guys and girls can never be friends. It always has to lead to something more. He then says that he would never date me and that I'm too emotionally unstable for him, and a slew of other insults. One thing that he said that especially scares me is that he was raised to take whatever he wants, no matter what, when defending his actions. I did not know what to do and I just started yelling and crying at him to leave my room. He refuses and then makes fun of me for crying. At this point, he still has my phone and won't give it back or leave. I threaten to call the campus police on him if he does not leave, and he finally agrees. After that night, he texted me every day for a week trying to talk to me, and one of my friends told him to listen to what he had to say, so I do. He ended up confessing his love for me and told me that he still thinks we cannot just be friends, even after I said multiple times that that is all we could ever be, and ultimately told him I think that we need to stop talking. All of my other friends knew what had happened and dropped him as well. He spent months trying to talk to me and became completely obsessed. I would still hang out with his roommates, but I would only go to their room when he wasn't there. On the few occasions where he would come in, and he would later text me paragraphs about how immature I was being for ignoring him. Finally, I said we could try to be civil and just be acquaintances to be nice, but that led to him getting very mad at me for still acting uncomfortable around him and never wanting to hang out with him. At this point, every time I would see him, he would blow up my phone and text me nonstop about being fake towards him and that I needed to get over myself. I finally blocked him. After doing this, he got very angry. He would show up where I was all of the time and just stare at me. His roommates would tell me that he talked about me every night basically for the rest of the school year. He would try to ask them things about what I was doing and who I was hooking up with. He would go up to my close girlfriends all of the time and ask what he could do to fix things with me. He tried to fight a guy who expressed he was interested in taking me out on a date. A few months ago, after the incident, he made up an excuse to come to my door almost every day. He started trying to talk to me in the hallways. He would offer me his things and even bought me a Christmas present. The last few months of school, he told his roommate that his goal was to sleep with me before graduation and that he thinks I want him and I am just playing games with him. I in no way want him or make it seem as if I want him. The only way I act towards him is completely disgusted. Even over the summer, he has been texting his roommates about me. All of my friends tell me that he is stalking me and recognize that the way I am acting is in no way asking for his attention. I go back to school in the middle of August, and he will be there. He will be living in a frat next year, so I don't have to worry about him being on my floor, but he still worries me. I think something is very wrong with him emotionally or mentally, and not just because of the way he's acted towards me, just in general. I don't want anything to happen to myself or anyone else, and I think I should do something about it. Looking back on that night, I would say his behavior and the things he said were very rapey, and that the people who think if I want something I should take it no matter what are at a higher risk to sexually assault someone. So this happened when I was 9 years old during the summer. I grew up living with my parents and younger sisters, and our house was situated on a cul-de-sac. At the end of our cul-de-sac, there were a row of hedges with an opening at either end that led out to a huge field that had a tennis court, a playground, and a long pathway. This is relevant for later. Everybody that lived on our cul-de-sac knew each other pretty well. There were also a few kids my age, so I spent most of my free time playing outside on the grass with them. It's also worth noting that it was absolutely forbidden for any of us to venture out beyond the hedges without an adult, because our parents would not be able to see us from their houses. So one late afternoon, there were 5 of us sat on the grass chatting. It was pretty rare for someone that didn't live on the cul-de-sac to pass through, so it caught my eye when I saw a man making his way hurriedly along the pathway closest to my house. He had a scowl on his face and stared directly at us the entire time he was walking past. There was just complete silence between us until we walked through the hedge opening, and I could tell by the other kids' faces they too felt uneasy about him. We then immediately asked each other if anybody knew or had seen him before. None of us had. It was quickly forgotten about, and soon enough, each of our mothers had called us in for dinner. Around 10 minutes after we had finished dinner, I was in the kitchen helping my mom with the dishes. Our kitchen had a large window that faced out onto the grass outside, so I was taken aback when the same guy walked past again in the same hurried manner with the same scowl, this time staring directly into our kitchen. He had walked past. I gasped and told my mom that weird man was staring at us earlier. She looked up at him walking past, but didn't see anything until he immediately walked past in the opposite direction, again staring at us as he walked past. I yelled, "Mom!" and pointed straight at him. She saw him and ushered me out of the kitchen, saying something along the lines of, "Don't be silly. He's probably looking for someone." I went upstairs to get washed and ready for bed, the entire time feeling a bit freaked out by him. From then onward, I started spotting him at least weekly standing outside our local places, such as the post office, our local convenience store, etc. Each time I saw him, he was alone and not really ever doing much, just standing and looking around. I was always in my mom's car when I saw him, so I just ducked and kept out of his vision whenever I saw him. There were no more direct encounters, so I figured he was probably new to the area, and over time my nervousness of him lessened. Fast forward to winter. I was at school and playing on the playground during our lunch break. Towards the top end of the playground was a padlocked gate that was about 8 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. It was rarely ever used, so it caught my attention when my vision raced past the gate and I caught a shadow standing there. I did a double take, and it was the man. He was pressed right up against the gate with both hands leveled with his head gripping the bars, staring straight at me. I freaked the hell out and started screaming and hysterically crying, and made a run for it into the school building. One of the lunchtime supervisors, who also happened to live with her kids on our cul-de-sac, saw what had happened and took me straight into the nurse's office. The head teacher, along with a few other teachers, were called into the room and asked what had happened. I was too panicked to say anything outside of, "The man is out there." So the playground supervisor neighbor took over and explained to them. She said she had spotted him a few times on our cul-de-sac and had a bad feeling about him, and had told her kids not to talk to him. The teacher went to another room to look at the footage of the security camera placed on the side gate. After a while, they came back to the nurse's office and decided to call my parents and the police. The decision was made for my parents to pick me up from school early so the police can come to our house and take a statement, and because I was a hyperventilating wreck. On the car journey home, my mom told me that the teachers had said the camera footage showed him standing at the gate and then sprinting away, which they figured was because I started screaming and crying. She said it was a good thing because I scared him away, but I was bright for my age, and I knew she was saying that only to comfort me. We meet the two police officers at our house, one female officer, one male officer. They are very friendly and make me feel at ease. Whilst they are asking me all of the relevant questions, they then asked me to describe what he looked like. But being so young, I could only say that he was white, tall, with short brown hair. They pressed for more information, such as tattoos. The only thing that come to mind, that he looked like Dan Sullivan from Easterners. This was met with instant laughter from both police officers and my parents, with the female officer commenting, "Wow, he must be quite good looking." As soon as she said this, my heart sank. After a while, the police had wrapped up the statement and told us to notify them to any more occurrences with this man. I was grateful for their help, but I could not help but feel like I wasn't being taken seriously by the adults. After this, I stopped seeing the guy around town, and the kids on our cul-de-sac say they don't see him either. Life goes on, and gradually, I regained the confidence to play outside again, both with friends and by myself. A year and a half later, I'm 11 years old, and it's the summertime. My parents had gone away on holiday, so my grandma and my aunt were staying at our house, looking after me and my younger sisters for the week. They were a lot more lenient than my parents and would let us play out for longer. And they even let me play over at the tennis court beyond the hedges. It was around 6 p.m. and was still light out, and I was racing my bike up and down the long path situated in the middle of the large field. I had completely worn myself out, and I was on the part of the path where it forks off near the tennis court, so I just sat on my bike for a while trying to catch my breath, while watching a group of people further down on the field playing cricket. Next thing I know, I hear somebody quietly but loud enough for me to hear it say, "Hey." I looked around, and I could not see anybody close enough that I would have been able to hear. I then hear a whistle, which leads my eyes directly over to an alleyway sandwiched between the hedgerow and the tennis court, and I recognize it to be the man from when I was younger. The sheer shock of seeing him again completely froze me up. I could not move. He steps out of the alleyway with one hand over his crotch area. He then uses the same hand to gesture me to come over, and it's then that I see the top button of his pants and his fly undone. I accept the very worst is most probably about to happen, and I instantly go into panic mode. I know that I need to get to safety ASAP, and I figured out my options. The first option is to head straight down the field to the group of people playing cricket, but I don't know these people, and I don't know if I can rely on them to keep me safe from this man. My second option is to ride my bike as fast as I can down the path past the tennis court, around the corner, and into my cul-de-sac. However, the man is in the alleyway, and if he ran through it, he would easily beat me to the hedge opening to block my way, or catch me if he wanted. I started pedaling like a madman and decided to head to my cul-de-sac. As I turn the corner, I see that he isn't at the end of the alleyway yet, so I bomb it through the hedge opening. I hear him running and saying, "Just come here." So I race down the pathway and make it to my house. The entire time I'm shouting for my grandma and aunt, and the kids playing out on the grass figuring something is up and ask what is wrong. I ditch my bike outside my house, go inside and lock the door, and I find my aunt in the kitchen. She's panicked and asks me what's wrong. So I explain everything as fast as I could and say we need to call the police. The next thing I know, I hear the kids outside yelling and screaming go away and calling for their parents. We look outside the kitchen window, and the man is walking past our house looking at me dead in my eyes, completely undeterred by the commotion outside and my aunt standing next to me. He walks out of our line of vision, out of the cul-de-sac and down the road. My aunt tells me to quickly come with her in her car to follow him, so she can at least see if she can follow him to where he lives. I get in the car and sit in the passenger footwell, out of sight. After about 4 minutes of driving, she brakes and asks, "Is that him?" I poke my head up. We are literally outside of one of my best friend's houses. He's standing at an old beaten up telephone booth that hasn't worked all the time I've known it to be there. He's holding the phone to his ear, but it isn't saying or doing anything. To his right are 3 girls, a little older than I am, sat on a bench chatting away. Oblivious to the man stood silently at a public telephone that doesn't work. My aunt parks her car and says she's going to sit and watch and make sure the girls are okay, and tells me to stay down. After no longer than a minute, my aunt says these girls are getting up, so I poke my head up again, and I see them go on their way. Suddenly the man literally just drops the phone and turns around on the spot to face the girls. Before he can even take a step out of the telephone booth, my aunt starts honking her horn and opening her door to yell at him to go away and leave the girls alone. I see him completely freak out and make a break for it up an alleyway, with which has 2 exits. The girls turn around and try to figure out what's going on, but my aunt pulls away and was headed over to one of the alleyway exits. My aunt tells me to get her phone from her bag to call the police. We get to exit number 1, but he is nowhere to be seen, so we head to exit number 2. Meanwhile, the policewoman on the phone says she is sending for a patrol car to the area and another to our house, so we can give a statement. We get to exit number 2, and again we can't find him anywhere. We decide to head home to meet the police, where I give another statement. The police officers sent this time around take me much more seriously, and after the statement was given, they said they will also spend some time driving around the immediate area looking for the guy. From then on, I did not see the man at all, and nor did my friend. We did not ever receive any type of update from the police, so I never knew what came of the investigation. The situation ended up with me being super protective and paranoid over my younger sisters whenever they were playing outside unsupervised. And I worried that if they were caught up in the same situation, they might not have been as lucky as I am. So scary, weird guy, let's not ever meet again. Let me start by saying this small little pretext. I live in a town where there is a certain breed of people, like a mix of rednecks, beach bums, like every town. My last story on here was several years ago, and this story takes place about a year after that story. That story involved a gun in my face. Anyhow, the shenanigans started in Texas, beach bum town. I live in a part that is separated by the highway. One area with middle class and some low class with sporadic bits of high class, and the other side of the highway with low income housing and shanties. The shanty part has had meth labs blow up, houses built out of 2x4s and wood, etc. I was sitting at home, normal day, and I decided to make some tortilla soup, but was missing the damn corn tortillas. I asked my mother, who was sitting on the couch watching another Hallmark show, if I could take her car to get some ingredients, to which she begrudgingly said yes. So I take her car to Big Box grocery store and get some tortillas, and thinking that it was going to be a damn good spicy soup with that right amount of sauciness and spices, little did I know how spicy it was going to get. I then left the grocery store thinking how good the soup was going to be when my mother called and told me to put gas in her car. I mean, she drives a Ford Focus. It doesn't use that much gas, but at least it doesn't take meth, which leads me to my next part. I go to the gas station during the busy part of the day and stood in line for about 15 minutes. I give the lady $15, filled up at the gas station from half a tank, when this lady kept staring at me from behind a gas pump. I was feeling more and more uncomfortable. At the time, I was around 18, and she had to have been in her 50s. She would look at me, smile, then stare more with this drugged out look. Sent shivers down my spine. This continued for about another 5, because the drugged up lady dressed like a high schooler with messed up teeth, and the typical meth head approached me. She said I was hot, and put her hand on my chest. I tried to back away from her, and was completely getting creeped out, and she would follow me around and wouldn't let me go to my car. I had to converse with her for about 15 minutes. I finally was able to distract her. Then I got into my car and drove home. Crazy methed up lady, let's not meet again.
In 2012, I was 12 years old. I got my first account on DeviantArt before I knew how to really draw. The only thing I knew how to do when it came to art was creepy pencil drawings with colored pencil etched into it. My first post was a drawing of a popular anime character with blue pigtails. So I drew a crappy rendition of this character, blissfully unaware that her skirt seemed to be too short in the drawing. Looking back, I was still at an immature age, so I didn't really think much of it at the time. Looking at the drawing now, it wasn't really that decent, but I didn't know that. Because I had drawn this, I saw a message on my submission where I uploaded it. In the comments of my drawing, there was someone who messaged me simply, "Hey, nice drawing," with the smiley face emoticon from the website. I was so excited, because it was my first ever comment on one of my art pieces. I then looked at my profile and realized that he had watched me as well. Then I was very excited and happy. I also had my very first watcher on my account. His username was Gluten in the title. I don't remember the exact details of his name. He favorited my drawing, and I replied to his comment by simply saying, "Thanks." Here's where things got a bit weird for me. He replied, "You're welcome," like common courtesy on the website, but then followed the comment up with, "I really like how short you made the girl's skirt." Keep in mind I was only 12. I had no idea what he meant in that context, so I replied with, "It's a statement for anime girls to have short skirts," or something along those lines. He replied, "Oh, of course. Yours is my favorite." Okay, a bit of a strange reply. Before replying to him back, I dug a bit deeper into his profile, wondering if I should be nice to favorite him back. His profile stated that he was 21 years old. Yes, the site lets you display your exact age on the top front page. And it was the same for me. I legitimately put that I was 12. Did he realize how young I actually was for him to not be saying that? But like an oblivious 12-year-old, your brain doesn't quite piece things together, and you go along with whatever may cross your mind. So I friended this creepy man back. I don't remember the conversation after that, only that we kept it friendly and moved on. I would occasionally post more pictures, but he would comment only on a few of them, and usually he was nice. But then there was always some weird comment like, "I wonder how long she can sit on that. If I had the character in a certain pose," or "Can I get to taste her? Please, XD." And again, I would pay no mind to these comments because my watchers were building up to see my work, and I rarely replied to the man again. I did, however, go on his profile again after he commented something and found pictures of this elephant cartoon that I forgot the name of. He seemed to love this elephant cartoon that he was obsessed with. And everywhere on his profile I saw this cartoon and fan art of it. Then I looked more into his gallery, and there was a lot of these gray pieces with the minus sign on them, indicating that it was a not safe for work 18 plus artwork. I didn't know this at the time either, so I tried pressing on it, wondering why it was grayed out. There then was a message that said, "Mature artwork. Must be 18 or older to view." I remember frowning at this, thinking that it wasn't fair for me to not see it. I wish I could tell you I never saw it to this day and didn't let curiosity get the better of me, but I'd be very wrong. I made a second account claiming I was 18 just to see what type of art this guy drew because my mind was curious enough to see it. How I regretted that. He had fan art drawings relating to or hinting at illegal underage porn. There were really disturbing ones relating to the cartoon he liked, with the little girl elephant character being strangled and raped by her dad. There were pictures of anime girls looking 10 years old or possibly younger in sexual positions, getting raped by her dad. There were pictures of anime girls looking 10 years old or possibly younger in sexual positions, getting raped. There were even some more gore-fest pictures among the elephant ones I saw, and illegal porn images that he mixed with gore themes as well. Impalement, cutting out body parts with a knife, torture involving blood, hypnotism, etc. Suffice to say, I unfriended the guy on my main account and was extremely disturbed by this. A week later, he still messaged me on my main account and said, "Why did you unfriend me?" Sad face. I felt no sympathy for him and said something along the lines of, "You are so disturbing, and you draw disgusting things." He said something to the effect of, "LOL, so are you. Let people have their own opinions, sweetheart." I then found out how to block a user on the site, so I blocked him. That gave me internal peace, but it didn't last long. A year after the entire incident, I was using the 18-year-old account as a backup account, and for different art mediums. Nobody knew this account was linked to my other one. Somehow my old friend Gluten manages to find me without telling anything about how the two accounts are related to each other. And exactly 1 year later, in the summer, he PMs me on my other account. The message said, "Hey, do you miss me, sweetie?" "I missed you since the unfriend," sad face. "That's okay." My eyes widened in horror, and I kept thinking to myself, how did this pervert find me? He must have been really experienced in computer tech or hacking, because I have no idea how that possibly could have happened, let alone a year later. I replied to him saying, "I unfriended you because you drew illegal things, and you should be banned from this website." What followed next was him trying to creepily get under my skin by role-playing with me. At this point, he was now 22, and I'm 13, still very much disturbed by him. But he only made things worse by talking to me in roleplay terms, using asterisks in everything he said. He literally said he was grabbing my bun gently, an asterisk, among other lewd comments to me, some asterisks and some without. I'm sitting there like, here we go again, obviously disturbed. So I blocked him on that backup account as well. Considering the types of things he drew, I think he definitely liked flirting with preteens on purpose, and probably got a kick out of it. For the most part, being on DeviantArt was okay for me after that, but people like him who drew lewd things like that plagued the site. He is the major reason I left it. So I know this entire encounter was online, and a lot of these experiences happen in real life, but you never know who you could end up meeting in real life from the internet. So gluten, let's never meet again, and let's not meet in real life, and I hope you stop flirting with 12-year-olds. It's really for your own good. I'll preface all of this by saying there were various rumors concerning this particular neighbor, namely rumors that he was a pedophile who preyed upon young girls. This information came from other young girls in the neighborhood, and even several adults warned our family to be weary of him. Now on to my experience. When I was in the 7th grade, I had an obsession over having privacy. Bear with me for context's sake. This was mostly due to the fact that my parents had taken away my bedroom door and would constantly look over my shoulder to look at whatever was on my phone. To combat this, I developed a habit of sitting in my mom's car so I could have time to myself without worry. This wasn't so great in the summer, no AC, but my stubbornness prevailed. Eventually, it became a consistent part of my schedule, where I'd always head to the car after school activities and homework completion. However, one incident stopped me from doing this from that point on. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon, and I'd gone to sit in the car, as per usual. Nothing was seemingly different, except that our neighbors, including the man clouded in rumors from across the street, were sitting on their driveway in lawn chairs, just looking around. They did this fairly often, though I always found it a little weird as we were in a lower class suburb neighborhood with not much to look at, but hey, to each their own. I'd been online to get my heart's content despite the summer heat, and eventually went back inside. The next day, however, something I couldn't have ever anticipated occurred. I had went through my school day as normal, and cheered at our middle school's football game. I was especially excited as this was one of the first games of the season, and my friends and I were still loving our new cheer uniforms. After the game, I got into my dad's car, as he and my mom had come to pick me up. I was a little thrown off because it was usually just my mom who did this, but I brushed it off. As soon as I got into the car, I could tell something was up. There was a heavy tension in the air. I'd initially tried to break conversation, but to no avail. Eventually, my parents came outright and told me what had occurred. Someone had left what could only be described as a horrifying letter addressed to me, or really, the beauty with her, like gold. This letter was left on the top of the car I usually sat in, taped on top of the roof. Thankfully, my dad discovered the note first, but he noted that the specific neighbor who we were told to look out for was outright glaring at him as he removed the note and read it. My parents told me what the letter withheld. A man explaining that he wished to dress me in white and take my innocence, that he had been waiting for a woman like me for so long, and that he'd be coming for me sooner rather than later. To top it all off, he signed the letter as your true love, who's closer than you may think. I was horrified, as my parents. They had already reported the note to the police as soon as they found it, and the next week, an officer stopped by to ask both my father and me questions about the incident. No arrests were made, and nothing came of the incident. But I was certainly more paranoid from that point on. About a year passed since the incident, and one autumn night my parents had gone out of town. It was me and my brother, 18 at the time, left alone, and we just kept to our own devices. That night, however, we had someone attempt to break into our house. I was asleep in my room, while my brother had stayed up to play video games. He began to hear weird noises coming from outside of his bedroom window. He turned to find a man's hand reaching in through the now cut window screen. My brother yelled, "Hey, what are you doing?" This was enough to drive the man away, but not before my brother caught a glimpse of what the man looked like. It was the same neighbor we suspected of leaving the note. The police were again immediately called, and my brother talked to several officers concerning the incident. I suppose there wasn't enough evidence to press charges, because once again, nothing came of it. We remained living there for another 3 years until we eventually moved, and I feel a great weight lifted off of my chest because of it. In my gut, I feel as though something terrible could have happened to me or my family as a result of these incidents. I also can't help but think that the two incidents were connected in some way, or by someone. So to the man who was looking to take advantage of me, who is believed to be one and the same with a potential break-in, let's not meet again. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, I lived in a small house in a very tiny rural town with just my mom. We had a family living next to us whose house and yard was trashy. I mean, broken down cars and piles of garbage, weeds taller than your knees, dogs chained up everywhere, house was falling apart. You get the picture. The household consisted of a middle-aged woman who looked pretty average besides the fact that she always looked tired and run down, a middle-aged man who had long matted hair, a scared face, wore dirty disheveled clothing and walked with a cane, and a young, well-dressed man, clean-cut, who was in his late teens or early 20s. They always had tons of visitors, mostly the run-down, dirty, disheveled kind of visiting their house at all hours. At that age, I didn't think much of it, but now I guess they probably had some involvement with drugs. My house was just a tiny little place that was a bit old. My mom was working on fixing it up, and at the time, our back door didn't lock. It didn't strike me as a problem since the town was small and no one really locked their doors. I always came home after school by myself. My mom was a single mom, and I didn't have any siblings. I'd been coming home by myself for a year before we moved into this house, so it was nothing new to me. My mom asked to call when I got home from school, do homework and chores, and not go out until she came home. Easy enough. I was a good kid who followed the rules. So after living there for a few months and things being fine, one day someone knocked on the back door when I was home alone. Assuming it was a family member, because no one else ever came over, I went to answer the door. That's when I saw that it was the dirty, disheveled, creepy man from next door. I stopped and turned to walk back to my bedroom without answering the door, because I was not supposed to answer it when I was home alone, unless it was someone in my family. Well, he saw me and knocked twice as hard, a frantic pounding. He went on like that for a few minutes, and while I was on the phone telling my mom about it, he stopped. About a half hour later, he started again. I didn't even get up to look. I just hid in my closet and called my mom again. She called my grandfather to come over from his house down the road and find out what the hell was going on. But by the time he got to my house, the neighbor had left again. That must have been Friday, because my mom was home the next day when he came back in the middle of the day. Her car at the mechanic, so it looked like she wasn't home. He started pounding on the door. I went to the door and saw it was him. I called to my mom, and he immediately left. She was tired of this entire thing because I would not stop worrying about it, and went out the door after him to ask him what he wanted. When she came back, she told me that he had found a kitten and wanted to know if I wanted it. How the fuck this didn't seem weird to her, I'll never know. I said yes, I did, and she told me that the next time he came over to accept the kitten and not worry about it anymore. She had a habit of claiming I was overreacting to basically everything despite being an otherwise amazing mom. So I listened to her. He came over again on a school day when I was home alone. I answered the door and accepted the kitten. I said thanks and went to close the door. But he stuck his cane in the way of the door so that it wouldn't close. When I looked at him shocked, he said he noticed our lock was broken, and he said that he could fix it for us. I told him I'd ask my mom, and he left. Being a kid, I forgot to mention it to her. He came back a few days later when I was again home from school alone, knocked, and when I didn't come to the door, he came in the house. I recognized the limping thump of his walk and hid myself in my closet in my bedroom, because by this point I had been getting a scary vibe from him for a while. And despite my mother telling me everything was fine, I was plain scared of this man. He thumped around a bit, never calling out to see if anyone was home, and apparently finding nothing, he left. It was at that point that I called my mom at work yet again, hysterical. She decided to fix the door because I was clearly panicked. He never came over again. I have no idea why. He just didn't. We moved again a year later, and I tried not to think about it too much, though I would occasionally see him walking around town. Apparently at some point, while I was in college, they cleaned up their yard. He got a haircut, and they somehow managed to become foster parents. Not long after, I saw a picture of him in the local newspaper on Facebook. He was being charged with sexual abuse of both his foster children, child porn, drug and weapon charges, all kinds of bad stuff. Apparently the younger man who lived with him was being charged as well, and later his wife was charged with check fraud. I saw it to my then husband, who also grew up in that small town, and he told me a story of his father once catching the man looking at his little sister's bedroom window. His dad apparently threatened him if he was ever caught on their property again. So pedo neighbor from my childhood, let's not meet again, please.
In college, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons from some shady friends we had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people. and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive, nearly killing me a few times. Needless to say, I got the fuck out. After a few threats and really crazy behaviors, he left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was headed to my dorm after a meeting one night when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which was right down the street. I got some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around, and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt duck behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening carefully. I heard something move and whipped around again. There, a person, his size, staring at me from behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but I just walked a little faster. I'd heard the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare stop or let on that I knew someone, probably him, was there. I knew he owned a gun and would likely put a bullet into me given the chance. He was that psycho and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the union and got some ice cream and just sat there in the store eating, unwilling to go back out into the unlit street in case it was my crazy, armed ex. I still hadn't mustered the nerve to head back when my phone buzzed. My hurt just fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They'd been walking way behind me when they saw something that alarmed them enough to text me. "Your ex is walking around the street," they called me before I could even text them back. "Where are you? Your ex is prowling around here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the union. I think he had a gun. Was he with you? What's going on?" Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me, and I was at the union and was too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not go anywhere, and that they were coming. A few minutes later, they came running into the union, breathless, eyes wide, asking why he was by my dorm and what had happened. This is possibly what scared me most of all. The boyfriend, who is a black belt in karate, is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched between me and them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex had better not try anything. I let the two of them into my dorm, and we went to my room, where my roommates put in a frantic call to the police. As we peeked out the windows facing the street and the side of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees to the side of the dorm, looking up. A street light reflected something in his hand, something shiny. I saw him tug at the .22. I realized he was carrying and looked up. We locked eyes, and I saw something, this kind of rage in his eyes that froze me. At that moment, I knew he was really out to kill me, and my friends and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran away through the trees. We didn't know whether he would come back and try to break in or something, so we called the police again, and lo and behold, sirens within minutes, and officers with guns drawn coming to the area. They caught him a few hours later, still with the .22 in hand. He confessed he was indeed going to try to kill me if he had the chance, but he didn't want to take pop shots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I had broken up with him, he was giving over to Satan, and he had a duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he could break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after that. I was so afraid and paranoid for years and years. Now I came out and about without any fear, but I still have nightmares about him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand, and eyes full of rage. This happened about 12 years ago. I was 14. My sister was 16. We were traveling with my parents and stopped at a motel right inside the Kentucky state line. It was across the road from a shopping center. Knowing there were a few hours of daylight, we asked my parents if we could go check out the stores. Being in a place that we had never been made them hesitate. But it was right there. We were pretty protective of each other already, and it's the middle of the day business shopping center. We were there for a while, 10 minutes before we decided it sucked and headed back to the room. Once we reached the parking lot, we went behind the first building knowing our room was behind the other side of the second building. Planned on immediately going behind both buildings at once, but there were a lot of cars leaving at once and it was the easiest way to get out of the way. A truck passed and dropped someone off at his room. There might have been conversation, but we weren't paying attention. The truck started driving super slow when it had sped into the lot before. Okay, maybe he saw people walking and decided to slow down. I noticed, but it didn't send up any red flags. We walked about 50 feet and he's still driving slow, still behind us. A red flag starts waving in my mind. I peek over to my sister, and yeah, she looks a bit concerned. We picked up the pace just a bit, knowing we were still a few hundred feet and around the building from our room. He starts saying something like, "Hey, my buddy wants to know if you guys want to party." While he was talking, we both looked back at each other, saw the guy in the truck looking right at us, and his friend walking about halfway to us from his room. Sister cut off "nope" and took off running, reached the room and slammed into it. Dad opened it right as the truck tore out behind us. Jumbled through what happened to my parents. Never seen my dad so freaked out. Called the cops. They checked the cameras and got the license plate number. Cops took our number, said they'd tell us if they caught him. They caught him a week or so later on unrelated charges. I think he got 5 years for everything.
This happened about 9 years ago. I was living with a roommate at the time in a townhouse in a suburb of Denver. My boyfriend at the time had always been kind of abusive, with the occasional slap or petting me down on the floor, but after a family member that he was close to committed suicide, he really lost it. My ex Pierce just lost it in the middle of an argument one day, about a week after the funeral, and threw me on the ground, punching my arm over and over until there was a giant bruise on one of my shoulders and a handprint-shaped bruise on my other. My face also ended up being swollen, and I had a bloody lip. My roommate called the police, and he ended up being arrested, and a no-contact order was put in place. He was also ordered to go to counseling and maybe drug and alcohol meetings. Fast forward a few months, I'm living with this roommate because I was completely financially dependent on him. She's taken it upon herself to pay for me and get my GED, and a lot of my time was spent on studying for the subjects. After everything, I was very agoraphobic, but even I managed to forge some online friendships and maybe even something more with a genuinely kind guy. One day, Pierce's grandma stopped by to take me to pay my phone bill. She lived close by in the same townhouse complex and was more or less right behind where I lived. I remembered it being the first beautiful and slightly warm day after a long winter, so I opened all the blinds and let the sunlight in, and I left them open when I left. After paying my phone bill, Pierce started calling her. I wasn't too concerned because I knew that he was supposed to be at his court-mandated counseling shortly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his grandmother told him that we had just stopped at McDonald's again. Not an issue at this point. I continued to eat my Big Mac or whatever until maybe 3 minutes later. Pierce calls again. His grandma tells him that she's probably going to be home in about 10 minutes. The call ends. I finish my food, and we leave. Again in the car, as I'm maybe 2 minutes away from where I live, Pierce calls again. I still can't hear his side of the conversation, but his grandma tells him the intersection we just passed, and suddenly I have this terrible sinking feeling in my stomach.
I know something is wrong, and I can't identify what, but I know in my heart of hearts that something is very wrong. I consider asking his grandma for help, but for context, his grandmother watched Pierce hit me and try to strangle me and openly express disgust at how I can't help but piss him off. The same lady that knew her daughter broke Pierce's nose when he was 6 because he saw his mother flip someone off and copied her and did nothing to intervene or let her know that that wasn't okay. The family member that Pierce was mourning for often told him he was fucked up and was probably the most verbally and emotionally abusive person I have ever witnessed in real life or any movie, book, or whatever. So this family is just super fucked and abusive to other people, to each other, so I'm completely alone in this situation. Anyway, his grandma pulls in front of where I live and I notice all of the blinds I had opened are now closed. We go inside, and once she leaves, I walk upstairs to my room and see a random Word document open on my computer. Pierce had written a whole page worth of shit, but I only pay attention to the big words at the top. I read your emails immediately. I know that he's seen the emails between me and a guy I'd met. Even though they weren't outright sexual or flirty, you could kind of tell there was something there. My brain stopped reading at this point, and I need to find out if he's still in my building. Because there's a no contact order, I know he would have come in through the back door so nobody would see him. So my mind latches onto this idea that if the back door is locked, he's probably gone. I run downstairs to the door, and I see that it's locked. But as soon as I reach the door, I hear a closet sliding open from the room I was just in, loud and angry footsteps, and he's yelling my name. I know that this may sound weird, but I can't recall exact details. I remember his face in mind. Before I could understand what was happening, I remember being back up in that room again. I think to go through all of my emails with him. I remember him slapping me hard in the face over and over until I got dizzy. I remember somehow convincing him to let me use my phone to respond to one of my roommate's texts. I don't remember what I said, but I remember that she called right away. I remember Pierce standing up 2 feet away from me and looking at me, believing he was going to kill me, and my roommate asking me, "Are you safe?" I only said no. She told me that she was on her way and would be there as fast as she could. Eventually, Pierce became convinced that I had called the police. With a knife in his hands, told me that if they were coming anyway, that he might as well give me what I deserve. I managed to convince him that I didn't call the police. Then he started crying about what a terrible person he was and threatened to kill himself with that knife. So, with a handprint on my swollen face, I tried to convince him that he wasn't terrible and to please not kill himself until my roommate came home. Insane ex-boyfriend, I moved to states, had my name changed, and only feel safe in buildings in big cities where I'm at least 3 stories up. Let's not meet again.
I lived about 20 miles from the city in which I worked, and about a short walking distance from my house is a highway, and on the corner is a 7-Eleven gas station. Last Saturday night, I went by there right before midnight to grab some Cajun peanuts. I see one car parked on the side, which is normal, usually just a guy working, and rarely any customers at this time. Do you ever feel this dread come over you? Like you know something is wrong? Well, I walk in and don't see anyone, no one behind the counter, or in the store, so I take my time and assume they are in the bathroom. Surely they heard the chime of the door when I came in. I'm feeling weird and uncomfortable, so I wait a minute, even though it seemed like forever. So I call out, "Anyone here?" I wait for a minute, put the peanuts down, and walk out the door. I check the car parked on the side, and there wasn't anything troubling. I even glanced on the back side of the store, and there was nobody. I'm pretty uncomfortable, so I call the police. They show up like 15 minutes later, and they search the place. They find the cashier dead in the men's bathroom, beaten to death. They called in backup, asked me to recap what I experienced, and then I went home. That ain't even the most fucked up part. So I get home and my dog is in the front yard, hissing and just staring at me. He is an inside dog, and my front door is cracked open. My heart is racing, so I grab my dog and head back to the gas station and let the police know. They send one of the guys to search my house. Nothing is stolen or out of place, but there was a sign of forced entry. So, this was last week, and about 5 hours ago, I get a call from my brother who works for the county sheriff's office. Supposedly they pulled the camera footage, and about 10 minutes before I walked into the store, someone came in, started punching on the cashier, and then dragged him into the bathroom. On the footage, you can see me walk in and look around and call out, and then you can see me walk out and check out the car, walk to my vehicle and make a call. About that time, I'm in the vehicle. The alleged murderer walks out the bathroom and sneaks out the back door, and before leaving the view of camera, he takes off in the general direction of my house. Fortunately, my wife was out watching Beauty and the Beast, but I'm convinced that I missed a murder at the gas station, and then he broke into my house. This week, I had a new security system installed, alongside a new front door, but I'm pretty sure whoever did this is still out there.